Next slide, please. Oh, go back. Next slide. This one. Okay. So this is the basis of everything. Everything that we call reality is a differentiated expression of our consciousness. So consciousness simultaneously differentiates into everything that we call reality. The consciousness is the basis of our emotions. Consciousness is the forces of nature. It is the siddhis and the riddhis. Consciousness is perception, it's personal relationships, social interaction. Your biology is an expression of your consciousness, your behavior, your environmental situations, cognition. These simultaneously co-arise from the state of consciousness. So if you're in the state of consciousness that we can call primitive, fear is a primitive state of consciousness, then everything, your reality will reflect fear. But if your consciousness is love or compassion, your reality will reflect that, all the different stages. Now in India, of course, we have again metaphors for this. You can use metaphors. So everyone's familiar with the 7 chakras. Think of the 7 chakras as an extended hierarchy of states of consciousness. We can think of 7 chakras many ways, by the way. Extended, you can think of 7 chakras, 7 levels of need, 7 levels of response, an extended state of kind of a metaphorical way of describing states of consciousness. So let me describe the biological responses to the states of consciousness. The most primitive biological response is fight or flight, which means you see a situation, you see turbulence, you see some stress in the environment, and your reaction is to either fight or to run. This is a primitive response. It's controlled by a part of our brain which is called the reptilian brain, which is the midbrain, which evolved about 300 million years ago. So if you go next to a reptile and you make a sudden movement or you make a sudden noise, if you're close, the reptile will attack you. If you're a little further away, the reptile will slither away. Okay, this is also called the startle response. And the startle response goes back 300 million years in evolution. It's controlled by the reptilian brain. Primitive. But yet, the world is right now an expression of the fight and flight response. Everything that's happening, whether it's communal riots, whether it's war, terrorism, eco-destruction, economic injustice, social injustice, comes from the most primitive first chakra response. The second response is called the reactive response. The reactive response is actually the response of the ego. It's now not about the body. The fight-flight was about the body, survival of the body. The reactive response is about the ego response, and it develops very early in our life, about 3 or 4 years of age, when the child begins to have a self-image. And basically, it's a sophisticated form of fight-flight. There are 4 types of ego responses that we have. The first is, the ego tries to manipulate and control the situation by being nice but manipulative. The second type is the ego controls the situation by being nasty or intimidating or angry and manipulative. The third type of ego response is the controlling and manipulating the situation through being stubborn, indifferent. And the fourth type is playing the victim. Okay, so once again, being nice and manipulative, being nasty and manipulative, being stubborn, indifferent and manipulative, and playing the victim, saying, poor me. So let's see how this develops. You're 3.5 years old, you're out with your parents, and you're in the shopping mall or something. Well, we have shopping malls all over the place these days. And you say to your mother, I want a lollipop. And your mother says, no, I got you a lollipop yesterday. So enough is enough. And so what's the first thing you do? You say, Mommy, I love you. I'll give you a kiss, please buy me the lollipop, and she says no. What's the second kiss? So that's nice and manipulative. Okay? Then the second response, what happens is she doesn't buy you the lollipop, you lie down on the ground and you throw a tantrum. Okay? You embarrass her by screaming, by crying, by getting upset. That's the second response. Nasty. And she doesn't buy you the lollipop. What's the third one? You come home and she can't find you, and you're hiding somewhere, and she says, aren't you going to come for lunch or dinner? And she says, I don't want to talk to you. You pout, you become stubborn, indifferent. And you still don't get the lollipop, and then last thing is you go to your mother and you say, you're nice to my brothers and sisters, you're not nice to me. You're the victim. And by now she's fed up, she buys you the lollipop, and your little brain says it works. And so you become a mind-body expert in manipulating people, either by being nice, or by being nasty, or by being stubborn, or by playing the victim. They did it to us. It's their fault. It's the fault of the government, the politician, the tax collector, my parents, they abused me, they didn't listen to me, but it's always somebody's fault. Okay. Next time you hear a political speech, please identify that your political leader is acting from the second level of emotional development. Okay. All political leaders are emotionally frozen at the age of 8 because there is no development after that. And unfortunately, that's true of all business leaders also. So we have now the fall of Wall Street, we have the big scandals everywhere, and we have a world that is unsustainable, socially unjust, economically unjust, full of conflict and war, because we are coming from the first or the second chakra. What's the third level? The third level is what we call soul awareness. Something you just experience when you totally turn back to the source. And this comes from Dhyan, Dharana, Samadhi. I'm not going to teach you meditation, but that's what meditation is about. It's getting in touch with the fourth response. Let's call it centered awareness, restful awareness, soul awareness. The fifth response is intuition. Okay, great leaders are intuitive. Why? And where does the intuitive response come? It comes from asking the questions. Okay, there's no intuition if you don't ask the questions, and there's no intuition if you don't listen to your body, or you don't listen to your soul, or you don't listen to your emotions. You have to listen not only with the body, but with the mind, with the emotions. There are many ways of knowing, scientific way of knowing observation. But there's an emotional way of knowing. There's a soul way of knowing. There's a level of emotions, there's a level of unity consciousness that brings us completely different information. So intuition, if you know how to harness the power of intuition, you'll realize that your intuition has more computing power than any supercomputer because it breaks the bounds of rationality. Intuition is a form of intelligence that is contextual, that is relational, that is holistic, that does not have a win-lose orientation, that eavesdrops on what is happening behind the scenes. That's the fifth response. The sixth response is the creative response. Not only do you know what's happening, but you know how to create something new, which I just went through the mechanics of creation, creativity, death and resurrection. So that's the sixth response. That's the fifth response. The sixth response is what we call the archetypal or visionary response that great leaders harness, and then they capture the collective imagination with that. And the visionary response comes from higher consciousness, which understands context for the collective imagination. The visionary response is the response that comes by going deep, not only into the personal domain of consciousness, but in the collective and more universal domains of consciousness. It's what creates the best brands in the world. You know, I do a whole 2 days on branding at Kellogg, where we teach business leaders how to create brands through the visionary response? What is the imagination that they address? What is the story that they want to create? And how does that story transform into higher vision? Okay, so that's the sixth response, and the final response is called the sacred response, which goes beyond all this. So that's the response you ask yourself, what would Jesus do? Or what would Buddha do in this situation? Or what would God, whatever that mystery is, how would God handle this situation? And now you have the entire range of human response, but in fact if you can transcend the first two, you've got it made, because 99.9% of the world is living in fear and reactivity and melodrama. And if you can go beyond the melodrama and the reactivity and get into higher perception through sobriety, you have access to a new dimension. So let's see the next slide. That's my mother, by the way. Next slide. That's the rose. By the way, you know, what happens is as time passes by, we forget the great leaders that made things possible today. And I know in India we've gone through cycles, you know, adulating Mahatma Gandhi, thinking of Nehru as a great leader, then criticizing him, etc. But do remember, just remember that it was Mr. Nehru. If you go to some of his speeches, go to his speeches immediately after independence, what was he talking about? I don't know if you know, if you heard those or read those speeches. Karkhane banayenge, educational institutions banayenge. He was the mind that came up with IIT, which is now taking over Silicon Valley. He was the mind that came up with the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So that's called vision, okay? You're looking 50 years ahead. So we are now reaping the benefits of that vision that comes from the visionary response. So here's my formula. It's very easy to remember because it's the 7 letters of the alphabet. Look and listen with the eyes of the flesh, with the instrument of the mind, with emotions, and incubate in the soul. Dhyan, dharana, samadhi. Second, learn to bond emotionally with your team. The best examples of emotional bonding are sports teams. So again, I have done a lot of work with sports teams because they're best examples of teamwork. Okay? If a soccer team or a football team is not bonded emotionally, you're never going to win a match. And that's true of any sports, cricket. You need everybody to doing the best they can for the team. So, and it has to be emotionally bonded. It's not about who's the best person in the team. The best teams are, most people cannot handle a team of more than 5 or 6 people, because after that, things start to get crazy within the team. Jealousies, competition, ego plays, etc. The best example of a team more than 5 is Jesus Christ. He had a team of 12 people. Okay, and boy, did that do great wonders. And the team was bonded. Okay, they were, except for one guy, okay, the rest were all totally in the vision of Jesus. So when I teach Soul of Leadership, I say, look at these great examples of team leadership and see what was the mechanics of bonding. So one of the things I also do right now, I'm a senior scientist at the Gallup organization, and you know Gallup does polls. Are you familiar with Gallup? You know, they predict things based on opinions. And so in Gallup we have an instrument called Strength Finders. So we can identify what a person is good at, what their unique skills and talents are. So we've identified 35 strengths, and then we see that each person that you see in the world has at least 5 things that they are very good at. Okay, these are actually not technical characteristics, these are characteristics of their soul or their consciousness. So my 5 strengths are: I'm futuristic, I'm adaptable, I maximize the use of my time and energy, I am a good storyteller, and I can connect people. I have connectivity. Okay, I do it through the internet, I do it through Facebook, Twitter. Those are my 5 strengths. What am I not good at? Details. I'm not good at execution. So what is my team requires? It requires people who are good at execution, who are good in the details. But an ideal team of 5 people, where you create 5 people who complement their strengths and who are emotionally bonded with each other. Emotionally bonded, this is also a sports team. You have a quarterback, you have a front player, you have a bowler, a pitcher, a batsman, you have a field, a wicket keeper. They all know what they're doing, right? And that's a good team, but they have to be emotionally connected. So in Gallup, this is what we do. We go to businesses, we go to organizations.